Richard Nixon is one of American history's most controversial figures due to his participation in the Watergate scandal, which made him the first and only president to resign from office. However, the details of this conspiracy and its impact on politics and the press are often misunderstood and understated. California Governor Richard Nixon initially served 8 years as Eisenhower's vice president. He first ran for president in 1960 against John F. Kennedy, although he narrowly lost. However, in 1968, in the midst of the Vietnam War, he ran for the presidential seat again and won. Nixon's first term was marked by a very strong foreign policy. Nixon's legendary visit to China is now widely regarded as what established an alliance between China and the United States. Nixon also initially escalated the war effort in Vietnam, although he began to scale back troops during his second term. However, during his first term, Nixon established himself as rather prickly with the press, either being a tough interview subject or declining interviews altogether. An incident regarding leaked papers from the Pentagon, which would lead to Nixon having his men break into the office of the psychologist of the man who leaked the papers, Daniel Ellsberg, only cemented his reputation of paranoia in the press, which even reached children like John Marshall, who was only 9 years old at the time of Watergate.
My initial view of Nixon was probably framed by what I did read in the newspapers, because I was starting to read newspapers at the time, and what I saw on television. He did, when he was on television, he did not come across particularly well. He was before the era of candidates who were really well processed to look smooth and talk smoothly. He was more of the old school who was used to just walking around and shaking hands and making speeches and not really necessarily appearing on television.
In 1972, Nixon stated that he would seek re-election, and he was re-elected in a landslide. However, in June of 1972, a member of the committee to re-elect the president, G. Gordon Liddy, organized a break-in at the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. The exact reason for the break-in has never been confirmed, although the most popular speculation is that it was Nixon trying to dig up dirt on his opponents. Regardless, the Nixon administration did its best to cover up the incident. However, due to an anonymous source known only as Deep Throat, members of the press were alerted and it became a media frenzy, led by the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Time magazine. Two of the most important reporters on the Watergate scandal were Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward of the Washington Post, one of whom wrote a book called All the President's Men, which detailed the wrongdoing done by the Nixon administration. Due to the media frenzy surrounding the scandal, a Senate Watergate committee was created to further research into it. One thing that was crucial to Nixon's innocence or guilt was the recorded tapes of Nixon speaking in the White House. Nixon would repeatedly refuse to give up these tapes and would dismiss a special prosecutor he had appointed, Archibald Cox, for digging too deep. Congress was infuriated by Cox's firing, which would eventually be dubbed the Saturday Night Massacre by the press due to the gross abuse of presidential power it showcased. Nixon, however, would allow Leon Jaworski, Cox's successor, to continue in Cox's search. Eventually, Nixon would hand over these tapes. One of them, the smoking gun tape, gave clear evidence that Nixon had been aware of the break-in after it had occurred and wanted to talk to FBI and CIA members to attempt to cover up the incident. In the face of steadily declining approval ratings, the resignation of Spiro Agnew on separate charges of fraud, and increased political opposition which made sure that he could not accomplish anything in the White House, Nixon decided to resign on national TV. Nixon was succeeded by his vice president, Gerald Ford. One of Ford's first actions in the White House was to give Nixon a full pardon for any crimes he may have committed while in the White House. Ford's pardon of Nixon was greatly controversial, and it caused his approval ratings to immediately drop. In fact, this pardon is often cited as one of the reasons Ford lost the 1976 election to Democrat Jimmy Carter. After Watergate, the informant known as Deep Throat was revealed to be Mark Felt, the associate director of the FBI. Nixon would proclaim his innocence to the public over the incidents surrounding Watergate until his death in 1994. Although the immediate political reverberations were significant, the most important contribution Watergate had was its relationship between politics and the press. Politicians had to be very careful about how they handled the press in crafting their public image, or else they risked making a very powerful enemy.
I think Watergate had the impact of making the White House and other government leaders much more careful in how they dealt with the press. Nixon's anger and dislike of the press was very evident long before Watergate, even though he actually got pretty good press through most of his career. He really disliked journalists and was very mistrustful of them. And I think that did not help him during the Watergate coverage. Since Nixon, presidents and their aides, I think, have gotten much smarter about how to handle the press and craft images that would be very friendly for television and feed the press the kind of stories that will keep generating positive coverage for them. And Ronald Reagan was a master of that. George W. Bush was a master of that. Obama has been effective at that. Clinton as well. They've all mastered that of crafting their image. But in terms of the political world in general and government in general, I think really the great tragedy of Watergate is that beforehand, and opinion surveys show this, that most people in the public really thought that most people in the government, most of their political leaders, were really well-meaning people who were looking out for their interests. They might disagree with them about different things, but by and large, they thought most of the leaders were really fairly trustworthy and decent people. That really changed after Watergate, and the public has become so distrustful of government and anybody.